This is a story that happened to me back when I was in college. I'm pretty sure I was a freshman, and I know that I lived in the dorms. My college was really small, probably around 2,000 students, and the campus had about 5 buildings on it. One day, I got back from a morning class and went back to my dorm. I had a little bit of free time until my next class, so I did some homework. Then I left my dorm room early to go to my final class for the day. I had to walk across a courtyard to the building where my class was. It would only take about 5 minutes. After leaving my dorm, I noticed it was very quiet outside. There were virtually no other students walking around. This wasn't that unusual, though, because of how small the college was, and most classes were still in session. Since it was still about 20 minutes before my class started, I got to the building where my class was and tried going inside, but for some reason, the door was locked. I found this really odd because this was one of the main entrances to the building. I went to another door, but that one was locked too. In fact, every possible entrance to the building was locked. I knew that our class was supposed to be in there, and I wasn't really sure what was going on. It wasn't an excuse for me to not show up, though. I was a good student, but the class was pretty boring, and I didn't mind skipping it. I turned and walked back to my dorm. As I was turning around, in the distance, I saw this one guy running. I thought it was kind of weird. He ran from behind one of the other buildings, and then went behind a bush, probably about 100 feet away from me. As I started to walk back to my dorm, I saw the guy come out from the bush and then start to walk in my direction. I turned back and kept walking. My plan was to go back to my dorm and take a nap. I remember getting to the door of my dorm building and opening it up. When I got inside, I was starting to walk down the hallway when I heard somebody trying to open the front door. I looked back and saw the same guy who I had seen outside running. He looked in the window right at me and waved. Then he knocked on the window a few times. The guy wanted me to let him in. At first, I was going to. I didn't know who he was, I had never seen him before. I thought maybe he lost his key to get in or something. But for some reason, as I took a step in his direction, I just got a bad feeling like it would not be good to let him in. I ended up just turning and walking away. I felt kind of bad, but if he didn't live there, I wasn't supposed to let him in. And if he did live there, after all, and maybe lost or forgot his key, he could just go to the offices and get another key fob or get let in. I had never seen him in the building, though, so I really wasn't sure. I went upstairs to my dorm room and then fell asleep for an hour or two. As a college student, I was never getting enough sleep, so I took naps all the time. I remember going to the window of my dorm room and looking out to see several police cars around campus. Some had flashing lights, and I was wondering what was going on. I checked my student email and saw notifications of a lockdown. They were from earlier in the day, and I realized why the building doors had been locked and why we hadn't had class. In that first email, there weren't many details. We were told to stay in the buildings we were in and would be notified when the lockdown was over. We were also told that classes were canceled. I'm not sure how, but I wasn't aware of the lockdown until that point. I stayed inside my dorm room, and classes were called off for the rest of the day. Just about 30 minutes later, the lockdown finally ended. It took a few days for me to get all of the information about what happened, or at least most of it, but a guy who didn't attend the college but lived in the area apparently made several threats against the university. Somebody who did go to the college knew the guy and reported him. He later showed up on campus, and after being seen, he was reported, and the place got locked down. He was locked out of buildings and hid on campus for several hours. There were multiple reports of him trying to get inside buildings. He happened to be the same person that I had seen outside, and I almost let him into my dorm building. I'm really glad I didn't. When I went to college, I attended a large university with about 40,000 students. The campus was big, and I was there for 4 years. For some background, I'm a female, and this happened in my junior year. It was in the fall, and up until that point, it had been a pretty normal school year. During that time, I lived a little off campus in an apartment that I rented with 2 other roommates. Most of the classes I attended had quite a few students. We had classes in large rooms with many seats, so it was hard to know all the other students in each class. In one of my classes, I usually got there early and sat in the same spot. It was towards the back, on one end, near the aisle. I would be one of the first students to arrive, and a few weeks into the semester, a guy started sitting next to me. He also began talking to me every time he sat there, and I wasn't happy about it. He was rude, annoying, and wouldn't leave me alone. He never introduced himself, but I found out his name was Jake. Every time he talked to me, he would suggest I come over to his place, and I would always say no. This went on for about 2 weeks, but it felt like longer because he never paid attention in class like I tried to. He would talk to me or just go on his phone, which was really distracting. When I told him he was being annoying, he didn't stop until about the 5th time I told him. Finally, he did stop and also stopped showing up to class. I would see him after class, though, and he kept trying to talk to me. Soon, however, I stopped seeing him altogether. I didn't really know anything about him, but once I stopped seeing him, I was glad and didn't give it much more thought. No more than a week after I stopped seeing him, he began reaching out to me on social media. He first added me on Snapchat. I'm not sure how he got my username, but after he added me, I added him back, not knowing it was the same Jake. When he started snapping me, I realized who it was. I did not reply and deleted him. He then moved to Instagram and started sending me direct messages. I didn't respond, and then he started sending me texts. I had no interest in him at all, so I blocked him on all platforms. It wasn't just that I didn't like him, something about him gave me a bad feeling. After I blocked him, I thought my problems were over. I figured he would leave me alone and move on. For several days, I didn't hear from or see him, but then one night, I happened to be home at my apartment by myself. Both of my roommates were gone, one was at work, and the other was at her boyfriend's place. Around 9 o'clock at night, there was a knock on the door. This was kind of weird. Our apartment was on the 2nd level of a 2-story building, but it opened up to the outdoors with a walkway, kind of like a motel. I walked over and looked out the window to see Jake standing there. I immediately had a really bad feeling. How did he know where I lived? I had no idea, but there was no way I was answering the door. My first thought was to try and ignore it. I calmly walked away into the hallway and then to my bedroom. I heard the knocking again, but still ignored it. After about 5 minutes of not hearing any more knocking, I left my bedroom. When I got into the living room, I saw Jake leaning down and looking into our window. We had some curtains, but they didn't cover the whole window, so it wasn't hard to see in. He was looking right at me. My first reaction was to quickly move back into my bedroom. As I was walking away, he started banging on the glass. I had a really bad feeling and was afraid he was going to break in. He banged on the glass again, even harder than before. At that point, I decided to call the police. Clearly, he could see that I didn't want to talk to him, and I wanted him to go away. I dialed 911 and hid in my bedroom as I told the operator what was happening. I was told that the police would arrive shortly. Meanwhile, I wasn't hearing any more knocks on the window or door. I got curious as I waited and went out into the hallway to look around the corner. When I did, I saw that he was still there, looking through the window as before. I quickly went back into my bedroom and didn't come out until I was sure the police were there. They arrived pretty fast, and Jake was still at my door. I heard them talking to him, and then I went into the living room. The officers basically told Jake not to bother me again in any way. He agreed, and they sent him on his way. I then talked to the officers and explained what had happened. I hoped this incident would make Jake leave me alone once and for all. For the next week or so, I didn't see or hear from him, and I thought everything was back to normal. But about a week and a half later, I had a normal school day. I went to one of my classes as usual. Maybe 10 minutes into it, I heard a weird noise come over the class speakers. The professor stopped what he was doing and checked his phone. Then there was an announcement that the campus was being locked down. This seemed really strange, and everyone was confused. All the students in the class started talking at once. The professor walked over to all the doors, closed them, and locked them. He told us we couldn't leave until the lockdown was over. I tried to find out what was going on, but nobody seemed to know anything. This went on for probably 30 minutes or longer. Finally, it was over, and the professor ended class early. After that, I went home. I found out that the lockdown was caused when someone spotted a man, who happened to be Jake, walking on campus, and he was seen with what appeared to be a gun. It was reported immediately, which triggered the lockdown and an investigation. I guess Jake tried to enter a building that was locked and then left campus, but the police caught up with him after a campus security guard saw him walking away. Nobody was harmed, but Jake didn't even attend our school. I couldn't help but wonder if he was trying to come after me. After all, I had called the police on him. Luckily, though, he was spotted quickly, and nothing happened. It still really creeps me out to think about it.